That's a deal, right? Ride with me if you ride with me. You can slide with me if you feel like 550 on the 5 sticky. Come get high with me. That's a deal, right? That's a deal, right?
So they want me down and out. Ay, we ain't going out like that. We ain't going out like that. Watch me go and bounce right back. Down for the count, but the hound strike back.
And we're back with another episode of the Whole Brother Live podcast. My name is Dr. Maliek Blade, and I'll be your host for tonight. And I am the only host. So, again, apologies. Been away for a while. We've been on tour, getting ready for the tour, launching the tour. But I'm back in the saddle with the podcast. And eventually, for those that are not able to attend the tour stops in person, the tour stop conversations are being recorded and they'll be released later as podcast episodes, so you'll be able to hear what took place at the different tour stops. Some will be at universities, some will be at other places. But the next one is September 24th in Atlanta, Georgia. And while we're here, let me just read off all the tour stops. You can follow them at wholebrothermission.com, WHOLE brothermission.com. But the tour stops include September 24th in Atlanta, Georgia, Raleigh, North Carolina, October 23rd at Shaw University, November 6th in Baltimore at Morgan State University, and there's also tour stops coming for Tallahassee, Florida, and Los Angeles, California. So, mental health conversations coming to a city near you. Now that we got that out the way, Charlie Kirk, man, this guy Charlie Kirk has been in the news. And first off, I hate that I would naturally do this, but I know that there exists pressure to do this, and it's not for the right reasons. There are people who are out there who support Charlie Kirk who are kind of strong arming people into just saying, just pray for him and his family, just say rest in peace, just say he was a great man. And if you don't say any of those things, shut up, and we're going to assume that you're affirming his murder and that you're supporting that. And that's not necessarily the case. There's so many layers to this conversation, which is why I chose to have this long form conversation about it. But on my own volition, I'll say that I do believe that killing people for their words is unjust. I don't think Charlie should have been killed. I don't support that. I don't think that's right. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know anybody in my personal circle, near and far, that supports that. However, I do know a lot of people, including myself, who want to have a very real conversation about how we, as black people in particular, are forced to support racists or to overlook racism just because somebody died. I was just listening to somebody sent me a clip of Pastor Howard John Wesley, and he essentially was saying something that I had already said before, that how someone died does not erase or offset how they lived. And in many ways, I would say, even though Charlie Kirk did say some things, specific things that I did agree with, and we may have been on the same page on certain topics, there were several bad things he said that I didn't agree with that I would go as far as to say were racist. And the thing is, in our culture, um, people are being penalized for saying that. I have been, I've done a few recent posts, and I'll read through all of them. I've done a few recent posts about this Charlie Kirk situation, and of course, you probably had this experience. You have people from Facebook that come in and want to argue with you. People you haven't talked to in years. People you might not even know personally. You have people who just want to show up to argue, and that can be very frustrating because they're not necessarily listening. They have their pre-made talking points about Charlie Kirk. They see him as a good guy, and they just want to get their stuff off. But I'm going to go back through what I said over the past few days on my social media. Additionally, please pass on the link for anybody that maybe already has seen these posts. Again, I'm going to read through them again, but I'm open if someone joins with their camera on. I'm open to someone uh, speaking with me live tonight if they disagree with the accusation that Charlie Kirk was a racist or anything else that I say about Charlie Kirk or race relations in America. Anyone that disagrees is welcome to join tonight. And after I read through these posts that I've made and kind of clarify my stance, I'll then allow people to join. So again, if you know somebody that disagrees, if you have somebody you argued with, but y'all trying to keep it cool and you don't want to keep the conversation going, I'll be your guy. Send them my way if they want to have the conversation, but they also got to be willing to have their camera on. To find the link, it's too much for me to type out, but go to my Twitter page at Maliek Blade, MaliekBlade, and you'll see a post about tonight's live, but you'll also see under it a link for people to join guest.ecam with two M's .live /FA25A28B5. But the link is on that Twitter. Also on my Instagram at Maliek Blade. Look at my story on my Facebook page, Maliek J Blade. That's MaliekJBlade. There's a link for folks to join if they want to disagree with me, and let's talk about it. But again, your camera has to be on. We're not playing that hide behind the faceless profile stuff tonight. So my original post about Charlie, I had Charlie in mind when I did a video too. Maybe I should play my. Should I play my video? I'll just read through my post. So 3 days ago, according to Facebook, I said, oftentimes pastors have eulogized people at their funerals in a way that gets them to heaven, even though they lived like hell. This is why some of you mistakenly think it's your Christian duty to ignore the bad when someone dies and you force others to do the same. We preach that we believe in heaven and hell, but then back off and put everyone or our favorites in heaven when they die. This has become the acceptable version of pastors misleading the public that even the theological conservatives accept. I said that in reference to having Charlie in mind. People who support him, I think, obviously assume that he was a saint that went to heaven. And a lot of people, not getting into where he went after he died, a lot of people don't view it that way in terms of him being a saint. A lot of people see him as an evil person. And I'm going to explain why in a minute. Because to a certain extent, I believe that some people are just completely unaware of what happens outside of their bubble. They might live in a world where Charlie Kirk is great, and they don't understand anything else beyond that. And they get frustrated when they see people criticizing someone who everyone in their circle thinks is great. But I'll get to that more in a minute. But obviously, there's a huge divide. Some think Charlie Kirk is a saint, and other people think he was a genuinely evil and racist person. Next, I said, as a Christian, it is easy to defeat the argument of those that say Charlie Kirk deserved to be shot. That's the low-hanging fruit. It's wrong. Have the conversations that are being avoided. Those convos are why so many Christians have heroes. Those convos, the convos that people are avoiding. The convos that people are avoiding are conversations like why so many Christians have heroes that were slaveholders or racists. And conversations like how Christians can regularly stand with and endorse racists but not be racist themselves. Go talk about those things. And I said that because I felt like what I saw online was people attacking the people that said that Charlie Kirk deserved to be shot. They were just focusing on that, and it's easy to win that argument. So that's fine that you want to go in that direction, but let's also have the harder conversation that I recognize some white evangelicals, maybe theological conservatives, or just political conservatives may be avoiding, which is that many people view Charlie Kirk as a racist. Many people view Trump as a racist, and they always seem to avoid that particular conversation. For those that don't know, I worked in a conservative college setting that had a denomination attached to it and several different sister institutions. And I did diversity work there, coincidentally enough. And we'll get to that, Charlie's views on diversity, equity, and inclusion. But the presidents and the leaders within that realm released a statement about Charlie, and they pretty much praised him as being a godly man because of the stances he took publicly on things like abortion. And they just left it at that. They did not address the racism, of course, because their majority, I believe that that is because their constituency has a certain view of Charlie Kirk. And in many cases, decisions are made to keep them comfortable. But also, there's a level of ignorance to, oh, we didn't know. People thought he was racist. Who knew? Um, I'll concede that both exist. Some is willful ignorance, some is genuine ignorance and just lack of proximity to black people. And I'll get to that too. Charlie had really strong statements for black people and solutions and identify problems and solutions without proximity to black people. And it's so fascinating that someone who married white, dated white, uh, stays in predominantly white context has so much information on what black people need to be doing. Uh, then I did a post. We went to Southern University for our first tour stop this past Tuesday. We were talking about suicide awareness and prevention, and we were able to give away a $1,000 scholarship to a student and some free therapy. So then I did a post about that. I said, just left Southern University as it was the first stop of the tour. We discussed suicide awareness and prevention. Charlie Kirk was shot, and then Southern and other HBCUs received threats and are now on lockdown. So I left the school, and then the school goes on lockdown. Um, and it's interesting again because at that point we didn't know who the shooter was, yet HBCUs are getting threatened. And I think that points back to a racial element here as far as that Charlie Kirk camp being, uh, including, having within it racism and racists and racist racial ignorance. The next post, there was a need to say, quote, Black Lives Matter because for some, empathy, care, and concern are only activated when the shooting victim is white. And I had, again, some white people very upset with these posts. Um, then I said, I'll say more later. Part of the reason we don't have unity is that some of you believe pro-life plus Republican equals good Christian role model, and that is both unbiblical and a lie. And I still stand on that to this day, that there are people on the conservative side of politics who say they represent Christ, who lump politics together with Christianity and have misrepresented God because they're so focused on their political agenda. They lump all that together and try to get people to stay on that political side as if that is the only option for Christians, and that is not true. Additionally, being a good and godly man goes beyond being Republican and being pro-life. That is our critique for Charlie, that even though he was Republican and pro-life, he was still very much so a racist man too. So that is the difference in point of view. Next, black Christians have a hard time with evangelism because some white Christians have made people like Charlie Kirk and Donald Trump the face of Christianity, not Jesus. We preach the gospel, and the pushback is that Christianity is a white man's religion. White evangelicals have to own that. Black Christians are faced with leading people in unlearning years and years of lies about God, the Bible, and political engagement. No, quote, no, God didn't affirm slavery. Quote, no, you don't have to just say Maranatha, which means Lord Jesus come quickly. When an unarmed black man is shot by an officer, you can go do something to change the system, just like they do with abortion. The response to abortion has never been Maranatha. Quote, yes, if morals and character should keep Christians from voting for certain Democrats, then it should also keep us from voting for certain Republicans. But they don't tell you that part because they're practicing tribalism and spiritual abuse to bully you into falling in line, end quote. Next, any educated white Christian out there that disagrees with my recent post, question mark, you think Charlie Kirk was not a racist, question mark. I'm open to speaking with you. We can do a podcast. I prefer this over passive aggression some have exhibited. In my experience, There's never a desire to sit down and talk to black people face to face about these things. The option many white evangelicals have opted for in response to my comments about race they disagree with have been to try to get the black person fired from their job, putting laughing reactions on the post about a serious issue like racism, or hiding behind a faceless profile and spewing things they don't have the courage to attach to their name. So if there's a person that's above the childish behavior, let me know. I posted a clip of Charlie saying he'd be concerned if the pilot was black. And I said, ask your white evangelical friends what examples count as racism. If Charlie Kirk doesn't meet the standard, who does? From the conservatives conversations I've had, it seems like Joe Biden and Barack Obama are the only true racists to them. Either that or racism doesn't exist. In the last post, if I was constantly trashing other black people, my recent Facebook critics would like me much more. That's the problem. The litmus test many white evangelicals have for black people is checking their blackness at the door and pledging allegiance to whiteness. It's the modern day buck breaking. So, I had a lot to say about this because here's my context. I'm originally from Washington, D.C., and I uh, had nothing but positive experiences with the few white people I came across growing up in the D.C. area. I had my first kindergarten teacher, first teacher was a white woman, Miss Gazzaro. I'll never forget. Um, and then in middle school, I had some white teachers. My first full-time job was in a surgical office, and I had quite a few white colleagues. I never had negative experiences with white people. I said in a previous video that when I was much younger, in the single-digit ages, I made a comment about racism not being an issue or it being over, and I believe it was a black teacher who was elderly who pulled me aside and very sternly let me know it's not over, it's just more covert than it once was. And as I said in my previous video, that person has been proven right every day since then. So I then leave this area, Washington, D.C., where I never had any issues with white people. I never experienced racism. And for college, I moved to the South. I moved to North Carolina. I go to this school that was at the time called the College at Southeastern, but now it's called Judson College in Wake Forest, North Carolina. And that is when I got exposed to white evangelicals. That's when I got exposed to Southern Baptists. It was a Christian school. And I have never met, although I had some positive experiences with people I met, I then got exposed to this world of people who I naively thought everybody was Christian, everybody loved the Lord, I should have a good time. That was not the case. Several of these people were racist. And it came out, and me being from DC, I wasn't a passive person. So I addressed these things head on. And eventually was hired by the president's office to do diversity work. So here's one thing I need to highlight when we get to this Charlie Kirk conversation. One of my critiques for Charlie is that he's a white man in a white space talking about those black people over there. Whereas I displaced myself from Chocolate City, where I'm from, and spent an extended period of time from 2011 until 2019 working at predominantly white colleges and universities. And I began to observe this white evangelical culture that merges Christianity with Republican politics. That'll tell you to vote down the ticket, all Republican. That'll tell you and shame people for voting Democrat. I have a friend who was in that space. And till this day, I know that he would never want to make it public that he voted for Hillary Clinton in that race with Hillary versus Donald because they would disown him. They would antagonize him. But somehow they don't have that same energy for people that voted for Trump. It is because they present Christianity as if the only moral option in terms of your political engagement is voting for Trump. And with that, it also comes with covering up racism and making excuses for it. And I would dare say that they don't even believe racism exists, or they're intentionally making excuses for it for political expedience. That's why it's always important to go back to definitions, because when you talk to some of these people, you recognize that nothing seems to count as racist. They don't even approach it humbly like, hey, you're the marginalized person. Maybe I can learn from you on why you're saying that someone is being racist toward you or your community. They don't come at it humbly like that. They will trash you, insult you, be rude to you, Christians, because they don't even like the suggestion of racism. It makes them itch. They go crazy when black people start talking about race, as if we're not allowed to or worthy of that ability to speak authoritatively on that. Um, some of the talking points are that we are adopting a victim mindset. Um, let's go back to words. So, a victim is the person that was victimized. Being the victim in a story is not the same thing as adopting a victim mentality where you always make yourself the victim even when you're not. They tend to merge those things, but in a lot of situations, like George Floyd died. He was the victim. He died. But then they attacked him because he wasn't a worthy victim. He was a bad guy. He lived a problematic life. I forgot another post. Let's go back to the original one with the picture. So somebody named Dapper Damo on Twitter posted Charlie Kirk reaped what he sowed. And I pointed out, I reposted it, and I said, Vodi Bakum said this about Mike Brown and was widely applauded by conservatives. Then posted that to Facebook with the caption, I remember being at a predominantly white college, watching everyone celebrate Vodi's comments about Mike Brown. I imagine they don't view the Charlie Kirk situation the same way. So if you remember the Mike Brown situation, he was killed after an interaction with an officer. And that happened when I was at this predominantly white college. And there was a black preacher who worked in that white space who wrote an article for the Gospel Coalition. And in the article, he wrote that Mike Brown reaped what he sowed. So basically saying he put bad stuff out there and he got it back. That's why he's dead. And I, being one of few black people in my college, am on social media in college and seeing all of my peers reposting this article saying that this black boy reaped what he sowed and he deserved to die. So I'm like, yo, these people really are racist. Like, this is a very ugly thing to say. And I know that they wouldn't feel that way if it was somebody white that died. So that's why I brought that back in terms of this Charlie Kirk situation, because a lot of us think Charlie Kirk is a racist. So what if we were to say he reaped what he sowed? Do I believe he reaped what he sowed? No. But it's to show you and to show those people that had that mentality that were okay with black people being killed, being shot, not being a worthy enough victim. Why is it okay when the victim's black, but then you want all these accommodations when the victim's white, where we can't even tweet? It's hypocrisy that allows us to see Charlie Kirk as a worthy victim and Mike Brown not. It's also racism. It's not a coincidence that many white evangelicals denigrated dead black men over and over again when they were killed by police, but now they want all this patience and grace with Charlie Kirk. That's the racism. And that's why we had to say that Black Lives Matter, because time and time again you're showing us that they do not. Those people deserve to die, but this is a good one because he's white and because he agreed with me. So that's the racial part. And it even applies when they protect black people that articulate white supremacist talking points. Because it still comes back to race. Even though you're black, if you create cultural proximity with whiteness, if you begin to live in our spaces and talk like us and walk like us and dress like us and think like us, then again we start to give you some of your humanity back because you're because you're immersing yourself in white culture. So it still comes back to the white thing, white and black thing. So let's ground ourselves in a definition for racism. Uh, Here's a definition I pulled up straight from Google that you can easily find yourself. Racism or racist: prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism by an individual, community, or institution against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. Here's another one: racial discrimination or racialism: the belief that different races possess distinct characteristics, abilities, or qualities, especially so as to distinguish them as inferior or superior to another. Here are some of Charlie's comments because I had someone that posted quite a few clips of Charlie under a post, so I'm just going to play these. And there's one in particular about the pilot that I thought was really fascinating, because they still try to say that that one doesn't count either. That's not racist. Um, so here we go. Here's one.
Cleaning day. Now we have a full day to be able to smear and slander white America. This holiday is a wedge, and I put in quotes, holiday is a wedge, used to push for countless destructive policies demanded by BLM. And remember what BLM stands for: burn, loot, and murder. Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday is a nationalized race hustle.
Okay.
We know it's very obvious to us that you were not smart enough to be able to get in on your own. I couldn't make it on my own, so I needed to take opportunities from someone more deserving. You know, this is how arrogant Joy Reid and Ketanji Brown Jackson and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee are. They're so narcissistic, they think this is persuasive. That Joy Reid and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called the racist. But now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously.
Don't have the brain power to be here, denigrating, lowering based on race. You stole a white person's spot. Person who's deserving is white. Lifting white people up, putting black people down. Then there's the airplane one.
If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified.
So again, I have posted that one in particular and said that regardless of the context of what he was saying, that particular comment about the pilot is definitely still racist. And here's why. He was talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one, as a former diversity consultant, I can say he's lying and completely misrepresenting what DEI was about. And I don't think that was an accident. I think that intentional misrepresentation is stoking racial division. It has a racist motive behind it. Let me mischaracterize this to further denigrate and antagonize black people. Remember what the definition was. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. You'd have to find one and show it to me. And again, I think that might be, if you find it, it'll be the exception to the rule. DEI was never about, let's throw away all of our standards and put black people that are not qualified in to meet a racial quota. And then we'll be great. Because the reality is, businesses still have to profit for those that are driven by profit. Businesses still have to profit and function properly and maintain their customer base. And if you put unqualified people in, the quality of service will drop. And again, that's not practical from the perspective of the business owner, but it's also not true. It's not true because diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts were meant to reach out to non-white groups, underrepresented groups, because oftentimes in terms of employment, it's a lot of times it's about relationships. And if white people who were the majority, and I believe still are running the show, definitely holding most of the seats of power in terms of ownership and hiring power, it's very limited. It's very limited in terms of who's represented. So DEI wasn't saying we need to get more black quota, so let's just drop all the standards. That was made up. That's a conservative lie. It was about let's get people from different pools of different backgrounds to mix it up because the country is not all white. The country is diverse. Let's represent diversity within our company. So if the standard was that this job required a bachelor's degree, let's try to get some non-white people with bachelor's degrees. It wasn't bachelor's degrees don't matter anymore. That's not true. That's a lie. And that is creating a culture that enrages more white people because now they're thinking that they aren't getting jobs because they're white. And now they're claiming reverse racism. But it's all a lie, though. DEI was about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Look up the definition of equity. Look up the definition of inclusion. Look up the definition of diversity. These are very simple things, but the reality is that that side, and we're not talking about Democrats today, we're talking about Republicans because Charlie was a Republican, that side traffics in stoking racial fear and fanning the flame on negative preconceived notions that white people have about black people being lazy and undeserving and welfare queens, even though the majority of the welfare recipients in this country are white. Look it up. So we have a system here on the conservative side of things where they know that white people have certain anxieties and they're playing to it. And there's nothing Christ-like about that. They're playing to this reality. You should be scared of them. You should be worried about them. They're dangerous. They're lazy. But when it comes down to it, the idea of if I see a black pilot, a boy, I hope he's qualified. Again, denigration. I assume a lack of qualifications because you're black. That is racism. Go back to the definition. It's devaluing. It's putting you down based on your race. A pilot still has to have a pilot's license. Nobody was letting black people fly planes without a pilot's license. Think about this, people. We weren't letting black people fly planes without pilot licenses. And the idea that you would think someone that you don't know isn't qualified when all you know about them is that they're black, that itself is racism. And the fact that you would think that everything's good to go if the pilot is white, that is racism. That's lifting up the white people and denigrating the black people. And here's the thing. I know a lot of people say that Charlie Kirk was a truth teller. Charlie Kirk just simply told the truth. Charlie Kirk just told the truth about black people and they're not prepared to hear it. That's what some people are saying. He talked about crime in the black community. He talked about fatherlessness in the black community. And black people just aren't ready to hear the truth. And even though it was hard truth, that doesn't make him a racist or a bad person because he told you the truth about your community. Let's go there, right? Charlie Kirk, like many Republicans, often says there were governmental incentives to get the black fathers out of the home. So all the black moms, all at once, kicked all the black fathers out of the homes to get money from the government, and that's why the black community is so screwed up. They've been saying this for years. And that, again, I would say is racist because it shows that you view black people as so small-minded that we all worked in unison and valued money over family. So here's why that's wrong. One, those incentives were not just taken up taken advantage of by black people. So if that's the standard, it would also apply to white people that took advantage of some of the same benefits. But of course, it doesn't apply to white people, right? It just applies to black people. That's the racist part. But two, how easy is it or how difficult is it to just kick a father out of his home? Where did those fathers go? The mother just woke up one day and said, "Get out, I got to get this money." And the father just disappeared and all in unison? No. There are a variety of factors that go into why black families are broken. Trust me, I know. I wrote a book about it. Whole Brother, Debunking the Myths That Break the Black Family. It's available on Amazon, but also on wholebrothermission.com in the shop. Please go get it. I'm not scared of having these conversations, but here is the racist part. And I'm so glad I went to this comedy show because it perfectly demonstrated what I was talking about. So I went to a comedy show in a predominantly black area. The headlining comedian was black. The opener for the show was white. So the white guy comes out and he says, "Surprise, surprise." That's the first joke because we weren't expecting a white comedian. Two, his opening joke was, "Yeah, I'm from this city," which happens to be a black area. "I grew up here. I grew up around majority black people, and I learned a lot from you all. That's why I came out here late." And this whole room full of 2,500 black people laughed. Why did they laugh? Why didn't they call him racist? They didn't laugh and they didn't call him racist because there is room for critique and joke and observation when you have proximity and relationship. So it's not this hypersensitive thing where you can't make a critique, but people are going to, just so you know, and these are for the people that are crying because they get called racist. I'm trying to help you not to get called racist. It's about proximity and relationship. 2,500 black people who probably didn't know this man because he was a much smaller comedian than the headliner. People laughed at the joke because of proximity and relationship. He's from the area and the tone of it. But when you are denigrating and calling people dumb and challenging someone that has an Ivy League education when you dropped out of college, and still somehow you're the one claiming to have the authority and the more intelligence, those things play a part in how you're received. So for the white people that don't want to get called racist anymore, part of the issue is you're throwing rocks from, let's just say, Boiling Springs, Oklahoma, or Buck Run, North Carolina. You're throwing rocks at black people from a backwoods city that's full of white people. And you've never lived in proximity or close relationship with black people. And no, Candace Owens doesn't count. Having your one black friend who married white and parrots white supremacist talking points, that's not the same as actually loving and caring for black people. So if you don't want to get called racist, take notes from that white comedian. Take notes from maybe a Gary Owen. There are plenty of white people who live in close relationship with black people who are actually able to have tough conversations about community issues. So it's not necessarily that everyone's scared. I can speak for myself. I'm not scared of having those conversations, and I know several people that aren't scared of having those conversations. But the issue is when you, one, are just repeating it because of what you heard. You've never been around black people, but you heard that this happened, so then you repeat it, and you adopt secondhand perspectives and negative views of black people. I never forget my first year of college, my roommate, who, if you think saying the N-word makes you racist, then technically you could say he was a racist. My roommate in college ended up confessing to me that he used to say the N-word. This is, again, conservative, evangelical, Southern Baptist setting. He was working directly for his pastor at his big church in North Carolina, and he told me, over time, that when he first saw that I was his roommate, he went, "Oh man, look at my luck! I got the black guy." That's what he thought. That's what he felt. And then he went on to say that he had a great experience with me, and I was a pleasant surprise. That he was so glad that I was his roommate. And then he began to see me, as I've been through this before, as one of the good blacks. he had negative experiences or perceptions of black men because there were black men in his hometown who dated white women and were abusive to them. So then he carried that and had negative views of black men. So again, his perspective shifted a bit when he had more proximity. And then he confessed to me and he apologized, not for saying it in my presence, but for the reality that he felt shame for saying the N word in his home before he got to college and now having a black roommate and feeling bad for all those N words that he said. Proximity changed his point of view and his approach. So, what I'm saying to you is proximity could be the difference maker in how you receive. If you want to have conversations, if you genuinely want to help the black community, then maybe living in proximity, building relationship could help give you the platform to offer certain critiques if you genuinely want to help. But my thing is, I don't believe that Charlie genuinely wanted to help. I believe that Charlie wanted to represent the people that funded him and their platform, which, politically speaking, is about scaring white people into being afraid of the other and then presenting a candidate that will protect you from the other, the immigrant, the lazy black people. They're both sucking up your resources. This country is yours, built by your ancestors, and these brown and black people are getting in the way. That is the platform that Charlie stands on. That is the platform of the president that Charlie put in office. So when you consider his comments like, I wonder if that black pilot is qualified, you couple that with empowering a racist to take the highest office in the land, that is going to come up, right? That's going to come up that you're perceived as a racist. So I think it's important to be practical about, why am I being perceived this way? Why am I being perceived this way? Well, it may be due to a lack of proximity. It may be due to how you're having the conversation. It may be due to the people you're surrounded with. Not to mention that many of Donald Trump's, in addition to the racist things that Donald Trump has said and that Charlie Kirk has said, many advisors, some still work with Trump now, but in his first administration, were white nationalists. White nationalists who believe that this country is primarily for them. And these are not people that you can debate with. And this is why I said that if somebody wanted to debate me, you need to be on camera. Because a lot of times what happens is the people aren't bold enough. Some are, but some aren't bold enough to just admit that they're a racist. I've always said that you have to identify racist, because they never self-identify typically. They don't just say I'm a racist. I found that they end up saying things like I'm just traditional, or I'm just conservative, or I'm just Southern, or I'm just old school, old guard. And as you talk more, what comes out is, well, you're racist. You think that this country is primarily for white people and that these other folks are getting in the way. It's just Southern pride, states' rights to own slaves. You know, those things are racism, but they get rebranded as other things, so you haven't accepted or internalized within yourself. Based on the definition of racism, you're a racist. People don't like the term, but they are. And this goes back to what I told you, the elder told me, it's not that racism went away, it's just more covert. But like I said, Trump also has open white nationalists, that's another renaming of it, it's still racism, advising him and working for him right now. So when we get upset about why this man isn't looked at so positively, it's important to just do some research rather than just saying he was a hero because he was pro-life. You can be pro-life and racist. You can claim Christ and be racist. So what frustrates me is people want to have these debates, but a lot of times what ends up happening is, oh, I didn't know he said that. I'm not sure about this. I need to research this more. Well, maybe you should be quiet. Don't defend a stranger if you haven't thoroughly assessed their speech. But so many people are so quick to tell black people they're wrong about someone being racist when they haven't even thoroughly researched this person, or they haven't even had the decency to ask, well, why do you think that? You're just quick to defend because you're already dealing in a racialized way. White people versus black people. black person criticizing white person, let me fight. But if you were truly about unity, you would try to understand what the other side is talking about. And unfortunately, I see so many white evangelical Christians that never demonstrate that. If you criticize someone they think highly of, if you bring facts about that person saying or doing racist things, they will retreat, lie, or minimize. Retreat, lie, or minimize. Very rarely have I seen, help me understand why you're saying that's racist. Because obviously racism is a big accusation. So if someone says that, you would think that a compassionate person would try to figure out why someone's saying that, especially if you're white and you're not the primary uh, marginalized group. But they don't tend to think in those terms. So again, this isn't all white people, but I'm speaking for a select group that I've come into contact with that I realize is much bigger than me, uh, very widespread, and it's very hard to get through to people who believe that they're right because they live in an echo chamber, who assume that nothing you say matters, and they assume that black people that call out racism are all liberal or Democrats. Something that I have had to point out several times is, in my experience, and I feel like I'm right about this at a national level, most black people tend to lean conservative on certain values, although we primarily vote Democrat. If you talk about certain social issues, they tend to have very conservative perspectives. And I believe that the Republican Party, if they, but again, I don't think they will because there's so much funding there. But if they pivoted away from the Charlie Kirk and Donald Trump types and actually began to deal with issues of race better, maybe they would get more of the black vote like Democrats do. But most black people don't support certain, I would argue, most black people don't support certain ideals that Democrats hold, but they're willing to hold their breath and still vote for the Democrat because the racism on the other side with the Republicans is so abhorrent. And my thing is, it seems like Republicans don't care to change that because they found that they're still able to win by primarily focusing on white people and stoking their fears against other non-white people. But I tend to lean conservative on a lot of things. And I'm hoping to see the day where more conservatives actually take race seriously and potentially could win over some more black votes. But it seems like, again, they don't care about that. I am not throwing rocks at the other because I myself could be labeled an evangelical. I just happen to be a black evangelical. I want to work together to deal with some of these things, but we got to call a spade and deal with the issue. And unfortunately, the so-called brothers and sisters in Christ who happen to be white don't really want to come to the table. And I think that's because they found that a lack of diversity works for us. Being homogenous and primarily focused on white people works for us because diversity, equity, and inclusion is harder. Because then you got to worry about the experiences and the opinions and the feelings of all these other people. So unintentionally, or in some cases intentionally, they end up moving and living life in such a way where the feelings and views and opinions of white people are up here, and the feelings, views, and opinions of black people and all of the people are down here. I've said this in private, it's my first time saying it in public, but having passed through white evangelical spaces, I found that the most egregious sin is for a black person to make a white person uncomfortable. That is what makes people act out of character, especially if it's something political. You cannot be non-white and make white people uncomfortable because that is just taking it too far. A lot of other things can be forgiven, but you will be excommunicated if you make white people uncomfortable in some of those spaces. And that does not leave room for unity or healing, which is why America is stuck where it is. I think, honestly, a lot of progress is not being made because white people aren't coming to the table, because they're realizing they can thrive even without coming to the table. So at some point, they have to say, I'm going to do the right thing, even though it's not expedient. And I'm waiting for that day to come. This has been the Whole Brother Live podcast. Keep up with our tour at wholebrothermission.com. If you need a therapist or someone you know needs a therapist to process through some things, if you're a student recently at one of the HBCUs that locked down, need a therapist, going through stress related to the racial climate in this country, all those things I think will be beneficial to process through with the therapist if it's causing emotional or psychological distress. So check us out at wholebrothermission.com. We serve all 50 states and Washington, D.C. Also, we are a 501c3. Your gifts are tax deductible. Please consider donating. See you next time.